which then releases ACTH through the blood, which then goes and talks to the adrenals. The adrenals then release cortisol, and the cortisol, not shown in this picture, I added this arrow, goes back up and talks to the brain and says, okay, that's enough. So this is a loop, and it's actually called a feedback loop. And this loop happens on a 24-hour schedule. Okay? Every day of your life, this cycle, this feedback, feed-forward loop continues on. It's a very important regulatory system. On the right is a graph which demonstrates that during that 24-hour period, people with CFS actually have a different cycle of cortisol release than people that are non-fatigued, up here in the very top line, or people that have an idiopathic fatigue. Most of the difference occurs very early in the morning. And this particular study showed that this response of differences of cortisol release in the morning was specific to women with CFS. So here we see that cortisol is one of the main endocrine differences that has been shown in CFS, and particularly in women with CFS. We also know that the HPA axis is involved in modulating the immune system. And this is shown right here. Now this is a little bit different picture of the HPA axis. Here's the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal right here. The adrenal releasing cortisol, otherwise known as glucocorticoid. The cortisol not only feeds back up to the hypothalamus, but it also modulates the immune response. Specifically, cortisol dampens the immune response. So for example, when you have an infection, your body says, okay, we need to have an immune response. These cells right here, early in infection, turn on, and they put out chemicals called cytokines. Now if this response did not get turned off, it would then become detrimental to the body. What cortisol does is tells the immune response that you've done enough, shut down. So what we see over here on the right, and this is work that has just recently been accepted for publication, is that this network over here would look something like this if we put specific immune cells into the picture. So this is the control population, where we have T cells, T immune cells talking to neutrophils, natural killer cells talking to B cells, talking to T regulatory cells, and then vice versa. At the same time, we have various types of hormones and neurotransmitters interacting with these immune cells, again, to have a very coordinated and well-modulated response to whatever the immune response is responding to, the immune system is responding to. Now if we look down here, this diagram of the immune cells and the neurotransmitters is one that has been generated from people with CFS. So what you see now is that we have different communication. T cells used to talk to neutrophils. In people with chronic fatigue, the T cells are no longer talking to neutrophils, at least not directly. So we have a very different immune network or immune communication going on in people with CFS. Not only do the immune cells talk differently, but the neuropeptides and hormones are also communicating differently with the immune cells. So this is a very interesting and very recent finding in CFS, which actually has implications for diagnostics, which we'll get into a little bit later on, and possibly interventions.
I'm going to launch another poll real quick to find out how we're doing. See, these are some of the more technical slides, but just to see how the group feels we are doing in terms of the technical nature of the information and how it's being presented. we can't look around the room and see heads nodding or heads shaking, it would be really helpful. That's 80%, so it looks like you're not being too technical, so
Good.
keep on going.
Good.
Most people are following. Great, thank you.
Okay, let's jump to the cardiovascular system then. And there has also been quite a bit of literature showing that there are differences in the cardiovascular system in CFS. On the right is a graph which shows, let me find my pointer here, we go, which shows a heartbeat. Okay, this is a heartbeat, and this interval right here is called the RR interval. And investigators at the CDC were actually able to show that the RR interval in people with CFS is less or lower than people without fatigue or people with idiopathic fatigue. Very recently, another study was done to show that the QT interval, this is actually QT coefficient, which is this interval over the RR interval, is also different in people with CFS, okay, and different from people with fibromyalgia. So there are clear cardiovascular differences and differences in the autonomic nervous system that have been shown time and time again in CFS. We've touched a little bit on the immune system and that the immune system communication is different, but we really haven't quite figured out how those immune system differences would actually affect the ability of the immune response to defend itself against pathogens. This really nice picture on the right, here we go, are actually some immune cells phagocytizing or eating some invading pathogens. And this picture here on the left actually shows you, again, look at this molecule down here, our friend cortisol, how cortisol actually enters into the cell and regulates the way that an immune cell will in fact respond to pathogens such as this. And we know that the immune system is different in people with CFS, in addition to the fact that there is some component of the immune response that perhaps increases the likelihood that some people that get certain infections will not recover. The literature shows that about 10% of the people infected with a variety of pathogens will not recover even after a year following the acute infection. And this has been shown with Epstein-Barr virus, which is the causative agent of infectious mononucleosis, and with human herpes virus 6 and 7. And it's important to note that these pathogens, which are all herpes viruses, are found in greater than 90% of the people in the world. So why is it that 10% of the people that get infected with these take a long time to recover and or develop CFS after being infected? The same type of thing has been shown with Coxiella burnetii, which is the cause